Since the beginning of mankind, we have been making strides in transportation. Over 40,000 years ago, ancient Africans were building ships that began to connect the world and introduce commerce and trading. 400 years ago, they were packed like cargo at the bottom of those ships. Over 2 million died, and many jumped into the Atlantic Ocean rather than suffer the unimaginable journey of the Middle Passage. Those who survived built the transportation infrastructure of America, building bridges and roads, tending horses, and chauffeuring the carriages. But they were not all servants and laborers. The entrepreneurial spirit could not be chained. Paul Coffey, son of an emancipated slave, was an early pioneer in the transportation industry. Beginning as a sea merchant, he began building and selling his ships, becoming one of the wealthiest men in America. But he did not stop there. He began organizing freed and runaway slaves and captained his ships back to Africa, establishing new colonies for the free men and women. You see, it's not enough for us just to be successful. As leaders, we must reach back and bring others with us. We must mentor and teach young people about opportunities in the transportation industry. Transportation creates mobility. Mobility creates opportunities, and opportunities create freedom. The railroads in America were built for the blood, sweat, and tears of Blacks, Latinos, and Asians. Those railroads allowed many Blacks to leave the brutal, segregated South. The Great Migration provided hope for a new life. America's appetite for cars and steel created a demand for workers. This demand gave many Black families an opportunity to join a new middle class. One of those men was my grandfather, Hightower. Him and his wife Elsie was sent on a train to Detroit to work for her father at Chrysler. He got off the train in Middletown, Ohio, got a job at Armco making steel. But a middle class life wasn't good enough for Udell and Elsie. They wanted more from life, but more importantly, they wanted more for their children. They knew if they worked hard and built a business while working full time, Hightower's janitorial service, they were building generational wealth before they even knew what that meant. They started the business out of their kitchen and carried their children with them to the job sites, eventually grew it to be one of the largest janitorial businesses in Ohio when they sold it in 1979. Around that time, Congressman Perrin Mitchell and the Congressional Black Caucus passed legislation that required the inclusion of minorities in government contracts. This led to a boom of minority-owned businesses in the transportation and surrounding industries. One of those entrepreneurs was my father, Steve Hightower. He grew up in the janitorial business with a mop in his hand, but he soon realized, like his father, he wanted more, so he traded in his janitor's uniform for a business suit. After buying and selling the family business at 18 years old, he went back to the same steel plant that his father worked at and applied to be a salesman. But he told him he'd be a better fit in the plant. He walked out that door knowing he could work there for the next 30 years in the plant and come home and retire with a gold watch, or he could take a risk on himself and build an empire. He went to work utilizing the same programs that Representative Mitchell created and eventually struck gold, black gold, Texas tea, oil and gas. The state of Ohio set aside the fuel contract and he built a partnership and bid and won the contract, which led to the creation of Hightower's Petroleum Company. As those programs began to go away in the 90s, he pivoted towards the private sector and created a value proposition based on service, scale, and competitiveness. This led to our success in adding customers like Duke Energy, Kroger, GM, Honda, Ford, and the same steel company who told him his place was in the plant is now one of our biggest customers. Through tenacity, innovation, and professionalism, he built a business that last year did nearly $500 million in sales. We must continue to tell these stories so that our young people can know what is possible. They can only imagine what they see. The transportation world is changing rapidly, and we must change with it. And now we're on a path to becoming one of the largest distributors of renewable fuels in the nation. We embraced electrification and started an electric vehicle charging business. You must ask yourself the same question. Are we going to adapt or be left behind? Henry Ford famously said, if I asked the people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. We must be leaders in innovation and technology. Uber, Tesla, and Bird Scooter have disrupted how we think about transportation. And there's so much more on the horizon. In 2021, Virgin's Hyperloop, capable of reaching 670 miles per hour, had its first successful round trip. Drone deliveries are ramping up in face of a driver shortage, and General Motors released its first prototype of a flying vehicle. The modern-day highway system took over 65 years to complete. To achieve the vision of our future, we need all hands on deck. Now is the time to innovate and participate in the new industrial revolution. Charging stations, tunnels, aerial highways are just a few of the abundant opportunities to start new careers and businesses. Before he embarked on his journey back to Africa, Paul Coffey said, "My soul feels free to travel for the welfare of my fellow man." We must remember our history in order to conquer our future. We come from a powerful legacy of leaders like those who come before us. We must be in the captain's seat as we transport to the future.